Welcome, and thanks for joining me on the Ultimate 180 podcast. If you ever felt exhausted, overwhelmed, or trapped in your own life and wish you had a complete life makeover, then you're in the perfect place to learn how to pull an ultimate 180 and change your life beyond all expectations. I'm your host, Kristina Walker, and today's episode is all about how to set yourself up for success once you've committed to making a major change in your life or your business. Change can feel very, very difficult for so many people. And that's why I brought in a special guest with me today who is an expert in facilitating change in his business and his personal life. So, together, we're going to give you some practical tips on preparing yourself and others for a major change to minimize stress and maximize success. We will even address how to move forward when those naysayers step in the way. So stay tuned as I introduce you to someone who has been on my show once before with many requests for his return. He's a nationally and internationally recognized multi-award winning optometrist and so much more. He's been published in professional journals worldwide. He's chairman of the board of the Sjogren's Disease Foundation. He's very active in his community, and he's even starred in leading roles in over a dozen award-winning theater productions. And if you ever get to walk in his office or meet him in person, you'll understand why this wildly energetic and always entertaining Dr. Stephen Cohen is an expert in change and leadership. So before we dive in, I want to ask you a quick favor. If this episode at all sparks something inside you, whether it's hope, inspiration, or just a little nudge to think differently, please take a split second to hit that follow button on your podcast app. It not only helps you to stay connected to more life-changing insights, but you are also helping this podcast reach more people who may need a little help changing their life too. So let's get started as we navigate change together, 1 degree at a time. Let's do this. Welcome, Dr. Cohen.
Hi, Kristina. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So excited to be with you again. I so enjoyed the last time we were together, and I know we could have spoken for hours. And I love the topic you want to discuss today because it's something we all deal with literally on a daily basis, and major changes come with some frequency, and it can be quite daunting and quite intimidating.
It really can. I mean, it takes a lot, and that's why I really appreciate you being here with me today. I know you're an expert in this, and you've done well at just creating an environment. When you walk into your office, meeting you in general is fantastic. And walking into your office, you've kept up with technology, you've kept with everything that is new in your field, but there's also this feeling of welcome, like you've just been welcome home. Like you've done such a great job of integrating all the new and yet keeping something special there.
I so appreciate you saying that. It's interesting actually because for many years we had a tagline that was the way we described our practice, where we said where modern technology meets old-fashioned care. And it was all designed to be able to be innovative when it comes to advances in eye care, but to provide it at a level that feels like, for those of us old enough to remember, maybe the old Marcus Welby days with this more of a relationship and intimacy with it. And as I said many times to my office staff, there's one bit of advance in technology in a service field that I think is anathema to what we should be doing, and that is the automated phone system. So we hear that, and what do we hear? Say, for your convenience, we've put this new phone system. I'm thinking, no, it's not for my convenience. For my convenience, I'd be talking to a person right now. So I said many
Right.
times in my office that we have that system as a rollover. But I said, look, I want to be in the leading edge of all kinds of technology that enhances what we're able to do. And I want to be the last person standing when it comes to an automated phone system. Because if you're in a service field, what it says is, we're too busy to serve you. So we're going to guide you through it. So I said, people who call a service-related field want to speak with a person. So although there are times we may have to allow a phone to roll over to the automated phone system, the policy is we answer the calls directly person to person, because that also sends a message that yes, you are a service oriented business because you're providing service even when it comes to how we communicate on the phone.
Well, and I love how, I mean, what you've done and in that, right, you've noticed kind of that nuance of I love technology. We want to do it in this aspect of our business, but in this aspect, it doesn't align, right, with your main goal.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's funny, I just did a podcast on pausing to make sure that you're in alignment with your goal because we kind of go on tangents sometimes. But so if someone were to embark on, let's say they even have a business or just a major change that they want to create and to make sure that they are in alignment with their goal, or maybe they've been around for a very long time and they're thinking, why do I need to change? Why do you feel it's so important to embrace change right now instead of avoiding it as long as possible?
Well, change is one of those words that often, for many people, create a sense of paralysis because we relish familiarity, we relish routine, we try to create routine in our lives, and change is disruptive to that. So I totally understand where the resistance comes from, not just because of our desire for familiarity, but also because the unknown that change may involve. But when you look at it as far as preparing, I think it was the famous UCLA basketball coach, the legendary John Wooden, who said, if you wait for the opportunity to prepare, you will fail. So when we think about change, we think that, okay, we have an idea, let's go for it. And much the same as the duck on a pond where on the surface it looks calm, but the feet are going crazy underneath. There's a lot before change is implemented or even attempted. So much groundwork that can be done that are more likely to facilitate the change and produce a successful outcome. The old saying is that those who fail to prepare are preparing to fail. So
True.
that when you look at it, if you do, you come up with a plan, you come up with a course that you want to follow, you mobilize other people who may be stakeholders in that plan and allow them to be involved. It creates an environment that once you put the plan for change in action, more likely to succeed and more likely to be prepared for those roadblocks that inevitably will come.
So when you prepare, let's say you are going to implement some major change in your office right now, what is kind of your thought process of how you would start to make sure to prepare for a change, just so people understand what does it mean to prepare for change?
I appreciate it. It's a wonderful question, and if I would have to tangentially explain that if I were in line to be hired by a company as the CEO, if it's someone that's looking for a scorched earth approach, we need major changes in our organization. I'm the wrong person because I would tell them straight out, if you bring me on in this company, don't expect anything to change. I don't need to do the proverbial lift my leg and mark my territory to prove that I'm there. What I'm more likely to do, they say, listen before leading. So that I would look at it
I
first
like
and
that.
say, I want to understand the culture of the company. I want to understand who the individual stakeholders are. I also want to spend time with the people in the trenches, who are the ones actually carrying out whatever the task of the business is. So with that type of mindset, when I come up with an idea, first thing is do is ruminate it for a long time and say, what if, and what does that do for us, and where might it take us, and how is that better than what we're doing now? And then I start to speak with the members of my staff, our team, and talk about what their objectives are, what their experiences are, how that might impact the day-to-day workings of their business. Because without it being manipulative, there's a wonderful opportunity to motivate people to get on board. Because anyone, I always say that steering a ship is management, navigating a ship is leadership. And my
Yes.
job is to be a navigator, not to steer it. So that when I look at it is to try to get their ideas. And someone may come and say, well, here's what I think about that. And it's say, that's a wonderful idea. I may already have an idea of how I might want to include that or incorporate it, or that may or may not be a part of it. And I can say, gee, Kristina, what if we took that idea and included it here? Because there are two benefits with that. One, I'm going to get potentially a better plan in place because I'm speaking with people who have to carry it out. But more importantly, I've eliminated the proverbial saboteurs. And those are the people who
Mm.
don't feel that they have bought in or been included in it, that through commission or omission wind up sabotaging the process. So that by having the collaboration, saying we're going to take part of Kristina's idea and we're going to incorporate it because she brought up some great points, you're now motivated and you're engaged and you're part of the solution and not anything that's being thrust upon you.
Yeah. I really I like this approach. I kind of want to go back a little bit. There's just so much to unpack here. I really like the fact that instead of just going in and saying, like you said, lift your leg, right? And just change everything and starting where you're at is it takes away a lot of the stress, right? I mean, that's a lot, right? It takes a lot of energy to come in and just bowl over everything that's been doing. And if you're going to make a major change, and yes, you might want to be, this is such a good point you made. If you want to be at the other end of the 180, right, which is a complete change, but that doesn't mean to not take the best parts of what you're doing right now. And a lot of times, the best parts of what you're doing right now are your people, right? And using everything that you have now, that doesn't, a 180 doesn't actually mean like just scrap everything. So I love that approach, and making sure to take pieces, even if it's maybe not the full idea of somebody, but to take that piece and give them credit, to give them to get some buy-in. Because as you know, there's even if somebody um, maybe isn't necessarily a saboteur, but maybe they're a naysayer. How do you handle that when they're like, well, but yes, but this and no, that's not going to work because what's a nice, calm and simple way to handle that?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because not all naysayers are negative people. There's many people go into like a meeting talking about a course we may take that feel it's their responsibility to be able to point out where those roadblocks might be. So they may be coming in equally committed, but the tendency is to first talk about what's wrong with the idea. And I had an optician
True.
that worked with me for 19 years, who was almost like a sister to me, and she was wonderful, wonderfully did. But when it came to talking about change, invariably she would go to what won't work or why it may not or what the problem might be, and sometimes it's an obscure issue. So sometimes I would say, you raise very helpful points, but right now we're doing this 0% of the time. So let's say we're able to, through this plan, achieve maybe 10 to 20%. We've made progress. It doesn't mean it's going to work for everything or under every circumstance, but let's talk about where it has merit. And a lot of times what I try to do is say, as we talk about anyone's idea, let's start with what's good about it and analyze that, and then find out how to make it better. And then we talk about where the challenges may be to achieve that, or where those proverbial roadblocks might be, because again, human natures do that. And what's interesting about that, Christine, if you think about meetings that occur, if let's say you bring up an idea and I shoot it down because of thinking of where the problems or those roadblocks might be, there are two unfortunate things that happen in the meeting. One, you're not going to bring up another point because you've been embarrassed because of that happened. And two,
True.
you're going to spend a good part of the meeting waiting for me to come up with an idea so you can come back and shoot me down. It's just
That is a
unfortunately
good point.
human nature. So if we all go in and we park our egos outside and we look at it and say, we're going to brainstorm ideas, where we wind up with them may be vastly different than where we start. But let's start by talking about where the idea has merit and what it might achieve, and then find out the plausibility, the challenges, the opportunities that exist within that. So much of it is on that preparation that occurs, not just in brainstorming the idea, but also getting the buy-in by the people who are stakeholders who may be involved in achieving this success, and also for them to feel they're part of the solution, where they're more likely to stay engaged and motivated.
Yeah, no, that is great. And I think you really have a key there too on the naysayers themselves, because I think about different industries, people are who are very analytical, people in maybe technology or finance, and their job is to poke holes in things, right? Because of security, right? They're making sure that your business is safe. They're making sure compliance, let's say. And so I bet you that would be very helpful when you're dealing with particular types of employees as well, knowing that ahead of time, preparing that that is going to be the case because that is really their job. That's their job for the company. And so if you went in maybe preparing those people even before a general meeting of saying, hey, I know your job is to poke holes in everything, right? To keep us safe. This is how I want this meeting to go. I love that.
Yeah, because it gives
That's
the
important.
opportunity when you look at it, as I said, getting the right people in the right position. So somebody who tends to be gets bogged down in details and very caught up in the minutia is very different than my personality, which is big picture. And we can look at it and say, you know what, we butt heads all day long because we come at an issue from another point of view. I would much rather look at it and say, my job is to come up with maybe an overall scheme of what we want to do, a plan, chart a course. But I'm counting on you at this meeting, and there will be a point that we'll get to say, okay, now go tell us where some of those challenges are, some of those roadblocks, but might be so that we can best prepare for them if and when they come. So it's a matter of capitalizing on each of our strengths rather than highlighting the differences we have. Because I could easily get annoyed with someone who's caught up in the minutia, and they could get
Right.
frustrated with me because they may see me as either be scattered or pie in the sky type of view and not practical in it. And we each have that important value. But when it comes to change, there are so many people. You mentioned much earlier about, we've always done it this way. With that type of mentality, think of the advances. You say, why is it so much more important now? Well, we know technology is doubling it's at an unbelievable, an exponential rate. It's
Right.
not doubling in 2 years; it's quadrupling.
I mean,
And we
AI and I mean,
AI,
just
it's going to
AI, right?
that's going to change so much, even in the immediate future. So change is inevitable. And I liken it to if you're surfing and you're on the crest of the wave, it takes effort to stay out ahead of the crest. The minute you sit back on your heels, the wave passes you by. So it's
Yeah.
incumbent upon us to always look at it of how can we do it better? How can we take advantage of these new opportunities? It even went to a point that I had written a journal article many years ago saying that I labeled it, if it ain't broke, break it, because when we think about what we've always done it this way, it doesn't take into account circumstances that may have changed. And
Right.
often I brought up examples that, let's say, if you're a movie fan and you watch a movie, you've watched it one time, you had a Betamax or a VHS, and you watch the movie, or now you watch it high definition or streaming. What's interesting is the movie ends the same, but the experience
Yes,
is
it
different.
does.
It doesn't change the outcome. The experience is different.
Oh, I
So
like that. The experience is
the
different.
experience is different, and we have ways either to make it more efficient, more enjoyable, more highly successful, more effective. We have so many things that can come, and our job is to recognize, yes, we've always done it that way and it works, but maybe we can do it in a way that will meet the needs based on how things are changing now and what our objectives are now.
Oh, I
So
like
change
that.
change is something that, embrace the journey, embrace the unfamiliar, get excited about what might be, what might come next. There are great opportunities, but what we often face, there's a parable that I love, Christina, um, involving hikers, mountain climbers. And
Okay.
in this, to look at different types of personalities when it comes to affecting and implementing change, there are three types of mountain climbers. The first group are the quitters. They look up at the mountain and say, not doing that. And those are the obvious ones. The next group are the campers that get up to a certain level. They're comfortable with that level. They feel good about their achievement. They look up ahead and say, that looks kind of treacherous. I'm really proud of what I've accomplished, and this is good. The third group of the climbers who look up and say, there's still more to go. The problem for the climbers is when you get above higher, you're now exposed more to the elements of wind and rain and other factors. And you
Yes.
also have the campers below you grabbing you by the ankle saying, what are you doing? Are you
Mm.
nuts? So people, if you break out change and how people approach change, the quitters, they're not going to be a part of it. The campers are incredibly valuable, but you want to have at least some climbers in there that see opportunity and are willing to go beyond the comfort zone to see how that may play out.
Oh, I love that. Really, it's funny because I use a lot of mountain analogies as well. So I do love that. And I never really thought about the fact that you're right. If you're the one that's kind of shooting up to the top, you have to also prepare yourself that there are going to be those that are pulling you back down, right? If you prepare and you know ahead of time, you can have different gear, right? You can
Mhm.
expect that that's going to happen mentally and physically. And I like that. I think that's
and
very interesting.
and going back to what we were talking about before about all the preparation work, if you do a good job as a leader to prepare, you're more likely those campers either say, you know what, I respect you and I trust you, and I'm not comfortable climbing higher, but I'm willing to take that trip with you because I trust you. Or they're going to
Mm.
look at it and say, that's not for me to do. I'm not comfortable, but I'm going to be supportive of your efforts and the other climbers to go forward. That's why that preparation of getting people's buy in and involvement and passion and energy and experience is so valuable. So, if you ask me about change, what I would consider the most important thing is preparation and empowerment, because if you prepare, you have a plan, and if you empower people, you have colleagues, and you have collaboration to get it done. Um,
Yeah.
the
Oh,
problem that often occurs while we're going through the process, and you mentioned it earlier, you talk about going off on tangents. That's a very common thing to occur.
it is.
So if you know what your goals are, like I think about it, if I want to walk from here to the parking lot where my car is, I don't have to look at my feet. I just have to look at the door and look toward the parking lot and know that I see the car, I'm getting closer to it, I know I'm doing okay. When we tend to stare at our feet, suddenly we look up and say, how did I wind up here? That's not where I was going.
Oh, yes.
Because
I
so,
love that analogy. That's
so
so true.
yeah, if you keep your eye on where you're headed, you're more likely to get there. So what happens is when you get these tangential things that come up is akin to looking down at your feet. So when that happens, because you don't want to shoot down anybody's idea, is to then maybe come back and say, okay, interesting point. Does that help us achieve what it is we're working toward? Because we have one or two choices. If it does, we need to modify our plan to include that. If it doesn't, maybe we need to table that idea for a while because it's not in line with what it is we've all established we are trying to achieve.
Yes, absolutely. No, that's a great point.
How do you
And
deal with it, if I might ask? Because this is you've made changes in your life. Can I turn it around and interview you and say, what? Give me an example of something you've done that's been effective to get you from where you were to the ultimate 180 to let's do this.
right. Yeah, it is a lot. Thank you for asking that question. Um, yeah, buy-in is a big thing. And I'm going to switch it a little bit to personal life to answer that question because something you said made me realize how much, whether this changes in business or personal, but in business, because I'm a kind of a sole entrepreneur and have been for so long, when I decided to make the change into the ultimate 180 and start the podcast and do my entire business differently, I had to make sure and talk to my clients and talk to my husband because everything was going to be different, right? And really is very similar with the buy-in, right? Here's what I'm going to do. And I also make sure and address how it's going to affect them first. It's not about me, right? When I'm addressing them, I mean, good for you, right? Good for you, you want to change. But it's really not, I'm not addressing them to get kudos from them. I'm addressing them in the fact of here's what I'm doing and here's how it's going to help you or affect you. And that's what I did. One by one, I went to my one-on-one clients and I let them know that things are changing way ahead of time. When I knew I was making a change before I even knew what the change was, to be honest, because I didn't want to surprise them. And I also wanted to allow a period of time for me to be able to figure out exactly what that was. And so these are people that have supported me for years and I've supported them for years. And I wanted to make sure that they would always feel supported by me. And so I felt it was really important to have conversations about here is how it affects you. And I'm going to be getting out of the business of one-on-one, client help. And it's going to be a while, but I just want you to know, but I'm here for you. So let's start changing the relationship. And I did that it took a couple of years to do that. And before I felt like it was okay for me to step away and say, now, look, you've got this, right? And I'm still always here for you. And the same thing, I had to bring it into the personal side of my husband, right? Is because that changes financially, right? When you make these changes in a business, it's going to change things financially. It's going to change what it looks like of my time. Um, all sorts of the resources that we would need, the time that a period of time that I believe that I would need to take to do new things, to learn new things. And so for me, it's really all about preparing the people. And I think that it translates, whether it's a business change or just a major life change in general, is preparing yourself for possibly some poor feedback, right? There could have been some people that got very angry, and I was very aware of that. But I think I presented it in such a period of time that allowed for people to understand the change because they didn't feel the change right away. And I think that's really important because people who do not embrace change, like you and I might, because we like to change a lot, we embrace it and think that's the only way to move through life. Where people who like the kind of rote repetition of life, it when they don't have to, even though they know that it's going to change and it's not like tomorrow everything's different, those people feel a lot more at ease.
Without question. I mean, so there is no growth without change, because otherwise you have the status quo.
Yes.
My commitment is to find ways to do what we do better in my office till the day I retire, which is not coming anytime soon because
Thank goodness.
I still greatly love what I do. But what you've encapsulated, even going back to what I told you, what that was said before about if you fail to prepare before bringing on change, you're setting yourself up for failure. Your preparation, you easily could have sent out a notice to all those clients saying, we are now doing the following, and make an
Right.
announcement of the change that had already occurred. What you did is not only provide them with the opportunity to help you with the change, but also for them to be carried along. So if they were in perhaps that camper category and not comfortable with what you're doing, thinking, I really need Kristina as my security blanket. She's given me this one-on-one help to be able to help them with the transition to what either they're capable of doing on their own, how they're able to implement the skills that you've taught them, or to still be able to rely upon you just in a slightly different way. So,
Right.
when we talk about it, and not to belabor the point much, but we think about change, we think of going from point A to point B, but it's actually point A to point Z. And we have to take all those steps in between. And it may be that the people involved with us or the people we serve may not be aware of those changes until they get to maybe RST or U. But
Right.
all that's been done before to do that. And the other big thing is when you try to get by and getting the right people involved, make them feel as if they're really involved in the solution, is to park our egos outside, because
Absolutely.
nothing is accomplished when our ego takes over, rather than it being, gee, you raise a point that's contrary to what I said. What's the merit to what you're saying, and how might I consider that? That can only help me as long as I don't let my ego dictate what I'm doing, but rather my desire for the change or the metamorphosis I may be working toward.
I like that because I think sometimes just people, us in general, because we're supposed to go, go, go all the time and make decisions and click, 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 is there's such an importance in taking a pause because sometimes if somebody says something contrary to what you're saying or they don't like what you're saying, there's, instant feedback. It's okay to take a pause, right? Even a slight pause and say, just to get your mind, that ego, right? To push aside and just say, hold on, let's just hear what they say because they might have an idea that's better. Maybe they saw something I didn't see. Let's hear them out. And like you said, kind of shelf the ego for a minute. But it's interesting how many times, and I know I've done it in my own life, where someone says something and I'm over here, I'm doing this, and they're like, well, what about this? And it's like, no, like, no, 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 we're doing this. But it's actually better and okay to get a little bit of feedback, even though you're going to go in this direction and you know it. But it's better to take a pause because then you even in your deep down somewhere, you've heard that, you've assimilated that, and you've made another decision that supports your goal, right? It does add fuel to the fire, even in the positive. Even if you hear somebody that says a counterpoint, but you take the time to listen, and to see if that really is something that you should be aware of when you're headed towards your goal.
It's such good advice because I have obviously patients in all walks of life and all careers. And I remember a patient of mine who does family counseling, and one of the strategies that they do is that if they put two people together, they have one person that'll bring up an issue, and they ask the other person not to respond for 24 hours. Because the
Oh,
first thing it does, they get over the shock of the comment, they get over the whatever might bruise their ego, whatever else is personal, the emotional reaction to it, and allows them to ponder it. And 24 hours later, usually coming back from a different point of view, it's conceivable that 24 hours later, you're going to say the very same thing you would have said right in that moment. But it's more likely that 24 hours later, you're going to say something that was more planned and thoughtful and responsive than
yes.
just a knee jerk reaction.
And I
So,
think it takes the emotion out of it.
and that's
Is
so important.
sometimes, right? It takes that emotion, that instant, and you really get to view it from many different angles
Mm-hmm.
instead of just that instant pain, right? That hurt my feelings or whatever it's from. I love that advice.
But you had brought up before about it, like on a personal level. I can tell you that a number of years ago, I had perhaps what some might call a midlife crisis, but mine was very, very simple. And I was thinking, what things am I doing that I want to continue doing, and what might I want to try differently? And what hit me first were not the ideas of what fit those two categories, but was the lack of judgment in how I said it in my head. I didn't say what things am I doing great and what things am I awful at that I want to change. There was no judgment. What things do
Okay.
I want to continue to do, which is basically affirmation that I'm happy with it. And what might I want to try differently means taking a different course, but without the judgment. We spend a lot of time judging ourselves, and that
Yes.
can only be a roadblock to creativity. And I was pleased with the fact that in doing that introspection, I said, good, you have the priority in the right order because you're thinking, not judging the past, but what did I learn from it and how do I want to take that forward? So it's such a critical role to do that and to be willing to say what changes do I need to make. Again, it's leaving the ego out of it.
I love that. I mean, the judgment, it's amazing. We talk about judgment and we think, oh, we shouldn't judge others, even though, it's hard not to sometimes. But I think we judge ourselves the most.
Oh,
And
terribly.
right? And it really does, it keeps us from making the changes that we want to make. Because like you said, if you had gone into that, what am I terrible at? What am I great at? That is strictly an emotion, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
judgment, it's an emotion. And if we can take that out of it, we can look at things so much more objectively. And I feel like we make change so much quicker when we can look at things objectively.
Yes.
Like, not is this good or is it bad, but where it lies on the stick, right? Like, this works and that didn't work. Okay, more of this,
Yeah.
right? Instead of like, oh, this failed.
So when it comes to a mindset, then that type of attitude is helpful not to look at and say we had a plan and it failed. Because there really is no failure. Because if you try something and find that maybe you didn't handle the right way or that there might have been a better way, you're still learning that say, okay,
Right.
it didn't succeed this way, but what we learned from it is X, and let's try to do that. But when you talk about how harsh we are ourselves, I don't know if you've ever heard of the imposter syndrome, but the imposter syndrome is that I know my
No.
own shortcomings, but I do my best to cover them up to present the best me I can to you. But you're doing the same thing, but all I see is the good that you're doing because you're covering up your shortcomings. And we all think that we're different, but everybody is struggling with that, with identity issues and feelings of, am I competent enough to do it? Or am I the right person to do it? We all have those doubts and we think everybody else has it figured out, but we're all struggling with it. And the key is to embrace that and allow that to be part of what motivates you to always find ways to do things more effectively or better or whatever it is your goal. And this isn't a dress rehearsal. This is a one shot at it, and we have to look at it and make the most. And I can tell you that at this stage of my life, what I've prioritized in me as the most important factor in my life is time. That I like to look at things and saying, okay, with what I'm about to embark on, when I get to the other side of this, am I going to look back and say that was time well spent? If the answer is yes, I'm all in. If the answer is no, I need to reconsider because the one thing I'm certain of, I'm never getting back that time. I don't know how much I've left, and it's only going to take up something that a resource that is irreplaceable.
I love that. I really love that. I that is Yeah, it's a great way to look at it. And just to add on to what you're saying is it's really I try and look at these things as gathering data, right? If I can look at my life and think, I'm just going to gather some data, right? It's not good, it's not bad. And like you said, especially dealing with time, because I think a lot of people even right now feel like time is escaping them. It's just the kind of the society that we live in and everything is so quick, but it makes us feel like we don't have enough time. And so I love the fact of you're consciously thinking, where is my time best spent,
Mhm.
right? And then just gathering data. Well, we have to wrap this one up, but I want to ask if maybe you would be come back on again because I feel like something else that's important is we started talking about obstacles and when things happen and tangents and whatever. And I think that I would really love to hear what you have to say about and hold that thought. So for next time, but I really would like to hear what you'd have to say about when we do hit that obstacles and how we stay focused along the journey and when especially when we're pulled in multiple directions because I think this conversation today has kind of sparked a few things in my head. And so would you be open to coming back and maybe doing a
I
part two?
I would absolutely be honored to do it, and it's great to leave it as the cliffhanger. Let people always wanting more, but also there's a lot of things we just talked about that require a lot of insight and a lot of reflection to figure out how to do it. So I think it makes sense to then allow some time for people to digest, and then at another point come back and say, okay, now that you've done the groundwork and the
Yeah.
preparation, when you deal with implementation, how do you deal with the challenges that come with that? I think it's a great plan, and I would truly be honored. I so enjoy visiting with you, Kristina, and I think you're doing a great service, and it's a wonderful thing for food for thought for people who listen to be able to think about it in their own lives and see how it impacts them. So
Oh,
yes,
thank
the answer
you.
the answer is yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. I really appreciate you being here. And how would someone get a hold of you if they want to meet you, talk to you, come see you at the
Uh,
clinic?
well, my office is right near Scottsdale and Shea. It's about a half mile north of Shea Boulevard and Scottsdale Road. It's you can find it online either under my name Stephen with a PH, Cohen Cohen. An optometrist in Scottsdale, or our website is from the old Jackson Brown song, "Doctor My Eyes." So it's www.drmyeyes.net. It was our website. Our office number is 480-513-3937. And lastly, I can give you my email because I'm happy to speak with people who said, gee, I heard that and I have a question because I so enjoy this type of communication that I would welcome the chance to communicate with people if they wanted to. So my email address is Stephen with a PH, Stephen Cohen, Cohen, at Dr. My Eyes, all spelled out, no abbreviations, .net. Stephen.Cohen at drmyeyes.net.
Perfect. And I'll make sure and add that in the information too on my podcast so
Terrific.
people can get a hold of you. Well, I have just had so much fun and I want to thank you again for joining us. And I'm looking forward to taking the pause and then we'll have part
Reconvene.
two. Yeah,
Yes.
wonderful. Well,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you again. And thank you everyone out for joining me today. Please remember to hit that follow button if you would. And if you'd like more information on how to incorporate these tips into your Ultimate 180, you can join my VIP group on my website, ultimate180.com, and let's discover what's ultimately possible with you. You can also catch all my episodes there on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your shows.